Today on Locked On Rockies, it's time for a Rockies vibe check for someone that's been following the team, covering the team inside the locker room, asking questions directly to the Rockies. Let's learn more about the state of the 2024 Colorado Rockies with Patrick Lyons.
It's kind of been his bugaboo, but when you talk about Ryan Feltner, I feel like he nibbles a little bit too much when he's not going well.
We say this on a daily basis, and I think it's
Bobby goes with that changeup. He felt like he could rely on that pitch up here.
Here's chasing three. Shohei has multiple hits in 3 consecutive.
Would love to do the same here. High fly ball, deep enough, it should be. Cave tag and catch made by Pires. They'll never get it. Rockies win it. Ball sack fly. Colorado 7, Los Angeles 6.
Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast. I am your host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, Paul Holden. Your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network is this podcast. It is the Locked On Rockies podcast. And we are free and streaming on your favorite streaming services, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk there. You can also find us on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel where you can be part of the show. You can fire up your Rockies hot takes. You can let me know what's on your mind when it comes to the Colorado Rockies. And we are joined by a very special guest, Patrick Lyons. And Patrick, it is not a green screen behind you. You are, in fact, at Coors Field right now.
Indeed, yes. And if it was a green screen, I mean, this guy with the hose watering down the field, I mean, definitely should be getting paid a little bit extra for doing that. Yeah, got a good spot set up. Figure if I'm here, might as well look good.
Absolutely, and that's why we wanted to bring you on, because we wanted to get someone that has been with this team inside the locker room and kind of get a deeper understanding of where the Rockies are at in 2024. Before we dive into
for a lot of guys, a problem inning. Get through that first, get on a little bit of a roll.
It's a high fly ball down the left side. Ryan McMahon takes a look and he did catch it. Oscar Hernandez.
Swung on a miss, so Feltner gets a strikeout of Pires because he's come back from Albuquerque. Fastball hit well, left center field, and this one is going to fly. 3-run job for Big Mike. Just the start the Rockies were looking for.
And 97.
Bases loaded in the second.
Line drive, base hit, you bet he can. Biggio's coming around to follow Lux. Kike gets the green light. There won't be a relay. Shohei Ohtani has unloaded the bases.
And Patrick, let's just give the folks a little peek behind the curtain. This is coming out later in the week, but we're recording after the first game of the Dodgers series. And I wanted to do that because this sets the stage for my question here. The Dodgers are just fed, realistically, for most any other team, devastating news. Your star player, Mookie Betts, out for basically 2-3 months most likely there with that injury, and then I think it was the pitcher goes down there with the shoulder and stuff. A bad, tough weekend for the Dodgers. Yet they've come in, and James Paxton, the guy whose career, if you followed it, has been up and down and up and down, and now here he is with the Dodgers dealing. Classic situation, comes in, of course, and the Dodgers look like it's just the next one up. Just give me a little insight on this Dodgers team and kind of the differences between the Rockies. Because the Rockies dealt a similar situation, which in kind of ways they have been, they are on a completely different level.
Yeah, the biggest difference is depth. I mean, it's one of the two biggest differences besides just overall star power and those superstars that are getting paid like superstars. Performing and being on the field and healthy like superstars is really the big difference between these two franchises. As you said, it's the next man up. That's been a key feature, obviously, for the Dodgers here, and you saw it immediately. Miguel Rojas had a really good game on Monday night. James Paxton stepping up in a way for a guy like Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who was not only one of the favorites for Rookie of the Year award in the National League, but slotted in towards the top of Cy Young Award favorites. So yes, they've got a next man up philosophy, but credit to the front office because they've got those dudes down in Oklahoma City in AAA ready to go, and they've got a really deep farm system with a lot of talent at the top that's going to allow them to kind of patch up those spots should they need to. So even if they do feel a little bit shorthanded, and you're going to when you miss out on a future Hall of Famer like Mookie Betts, you know that there's going to be more help on the way, whether that's from the minor league system for somebody else that's coming off the IL or a player that you're just going to pluck off another roster via trade.
And you know they will make the moves. You know they have the farm system. Someone in there, especially against the Rockies, someone's going to get called up and they're going to just crush the Rockies in the second half of the season. Do you have any insight in how the Rockies view the Dodgers? I mean, what, especially after this offseason, do you have any, has anybody ever said anything to you about how they view this team, how they approach this team? I think the context is important in the lineup of Monday night's game, where if you really look at it, the Rockies did go pretty young in that lineup. Not a lot of the veterans playing in that lineup. But, man, you really look at it. I'm watching the game on MLB TV, and it's like, wow, after the first three batters in this lineup, I think everyone is sub 200 batting average. Mind you, a couple of people are sub 20, 25 at bats at this point and things. But that kind of opens your eyes, again, in that context of next guy up for the Dodgers. It's a veteran player. I think I was listening on the radio broadcast too. They have one guy that's 28 and everybody else is a 30-year-old veteran of the league. So they're two teams in completely different places. But I'm just wondering, how do the Rockies view this Dodgers team?
I think they just view the entire franchise as being in a completely separate league. I think Bill Schmidt said about the Dodgers that, hey, we're not a minor league team for the Dodgers, or maybe he was just saying we're not a minor league team for the rest of MLB. And he kind of said the quiet part out loud in a lot of ways, because the Dodgers do so many things right. They're not perfect, no MLB team is, but to invest in analytics, to invest internationally with the Rockies have just started to do somewhat recently, and it has paid off for them in many ways. And you saw that out in the middle of the diamond, for the last week or so, with both Ezequiel Tovar, who they extended, and Adael Amador, who will probably go back down here very soon, maybe by the time you're listening to this, once Brendan Rodgers comes back from the IL. So the Dodgers just do everything right, and it does help that, they play in a more neutral ballpark, that players will go ahead and sign up. In fact, there's probably a lot of guys that would prefer to take a minor league deal with the Oklahoma City Dodgers in hopes of not somebody getting hurt, but in hopes of an opportunity later on and winning a championship that season with the Dodgers, than taking maybe a 1 year, $1.5 million contract with the Rockies, because it's all about what happens at the end of the season. You can improve your value at Oklahoma City pitching in the Pacific Coast League, but doing that at Coors Field can be really rough and could potentially hurt your stock. So the Dodgers are really just in a completely different league unto themselves, and it's one of the reasons why when the time comes for expansion and reshuffling the divisions and whatnot, the Rockies will be very happy to no longer have to see the LA Dodgers.
And that's going to be a really interesting thing, I think, down the line. And it's, you hate to count on that, but it has been pretty defeating to be a Rockies fan compared to the Dodgers. It is really in two different levels. But let's shift the focus away from the Dodgers, and let's get the screenshot of the Rockies year so far. Obviously, they probably knew that it was going to be a bit of a struggle, but I don't think they thought that the year was going to get off to the start that it did. And then this team in May, you start raising your eyebrows and you're like, well, this is interesting. This is, stretches they actually haven't done. And then unfortunately, kind of as we've seen with the Rockies, it's following up a great stretch with a tough stretch. June hasn't been great. There's been some pockets full of good things, but the home sweep from Cincinnati, a tough series against the Pirates, and a lot of things that have really made June kind of a fall back to reality moment. What are you hearing about the Rockies about 2024? Are they frustrated? Obviously, the big news, if you're the Rockies fans of late, Chris Bryant's return, basically a question mark at this point, and that leads to a whole bunch of other things. What have you heard about the Rockies, their thoughts on the year so far?
Nobody from the front office has really discussed how well the season is going based on their expectations. We know that it's very common for them to have higher expectations than reality. We know about the comment ahead of the 2023 season about them, challenging for 500, and then they end up losing 103 games. So there definitely is a divide between reality and the expectations that they have. So I think the season is kind of going as they expected, right? Going into the year, they have all the pieces that they were expecting to have. I mean, Daniel Bard, of course, the news about him missing the entire season, I think some of that writing may have been on the wall, and they entered spring training knowing that he was going to be on the IL for a while. So they could have added another reliever there to help out. But this season is just really a transition year for letting a lot of those young guys play and finding out what you've got, who are going to be the important pieces going forward. And really that is just the young guys. So it's a lot of status quo, keeping things exactly as they are. And I think, what we've seen from this team so far is probably what could have been expected. I don't think they were hoping to lose 100 games in back-to-back seasons, but when you're inactive at the 2021 and 2022 trade deadline, that's where you get your depth from. We talked about the Dodgers having it, and you actually go back and look for just baseball. I did the preseason write-up about the Dodgers, and 4 of their top pitching prospects were all players they plucked from other organizations for big league chips. Like, hey, basically we can't use this reliever right now in our bullpen. We don't have a spot. We need to clear up a 40-man spot, and we'll give them to you. Give us this low A, high A guy that was a 3rd, 4th rounder, and we'll see what we can do with them. And they end up turning something out of nothing, whereas the Rockies typically get nothing for something. And that's been one of their big problems.
Yeah, and it's just the frustration again, where it's just like the Rockies have to strike gold, Ezekiel Tovar gold, right? For the Dodgers, it's like, yeah, we knew this guy. Our system is so efficient. Tyler Anderson, come on over. We got you. Paxton, we got you. There's so many times it just works for the Dodgers, and I know, but at the same time, it's got to be frustrating because it also hasn't paid off. Depending on how you look at it, right? A lot of Dodgers fans are going to be sitting there saying they've had a lot more fun watching baseball, and we'll have a lot more fun watching baseball than we have in Colorado. There's a lot of maybe moves coming up for the Rockies, and I also want to get your reaction to the Amador promotion as well, because while I think it was looked at as an aggression, I think it's kind of the right type of mindset to have in this season. Let's dive into some of that stuff in a little bit more coming up here in segment number 2 of today's episode of Locked On Rockies.
Before Andy Paz batting cleanup for the first time in his career will face Ryan Feltner.
Right there, strike 3 called, slider that fooled the center fielder.
4-3 on the inside corner. 5th strikeout for Ryan Feltner.
3 were on the homer in the first inning.
This is lined to left center field, and it's going to get down and roll to the wall. Michael to second. He's taking 3 bags here. The throw, not going to get it. Fast Mike. Big Mike is fast Mike. A triple for
things up.
Here's Bouchard. Bouchard pulls it. Stop there at 3rd, and by a step, Biggio gets Bouchard.
1 out. Jason Hayward the batter. Hayward is 0 for 1 with a walk.
Jason Hayward to right field, hit well. Jake Cable, watch it hit off the bottom of the wall. Hernandez scores. Dino Evil waving around Andy Paez. A 2-run double for Jay Hay. Dodgers back on top at 6-4.
Boy, he went with it.
Folks, back here on Locked On Rockies with Patrick Lyons. Patrick, I realize I did not give you the proper introduction in space to let you introduce yourself, as is the number 1 rule of online content creation. So please give us the lowdown on everything that you do and where people can find not only your Rockies coverage, but all your baseball coverage all season.
Yeah, it's Rockies and a lot of NL West, writing about the Giants and Dodgers a lot more this season for just baseball. I'm having a good time doing that. Also, I'm a part of a 2-man podcast with Ryan Finkelstein, also of Just Baseball, called Who's Better Baseball, where we talk about things other than the Rockies and some of the best stories in baseball, and we go head-to-head. Bobby Witt Jr. versus Gunnar Henderson. Who's going to start the All-Star game? Who's a better player? Who's going to have a better career? That's been a lot of fun doing that. I've also been doing some TikTok stuff and Instagram, doing little what's up with the Rockies in 1 minute, because sometimes, as you know, Paul, a minute is about the most that you maybe want to spend focusing on this team right now. Other times there's a lot better things to talk about, and you need more. You need a full 30-minute podcast like you've got here on Locked On Rockies. So those are just some of the things that I'm doing, and of course on Twitter/X at Patrick B. Lyons.
Yeah, and Patrick, again, insight, talking to players after the game, 1-minute breakdowns, literally one of my favorite Rockies follows. And Patrick, we were talking about at least trying to get an insight to the front office. And before we move on, I just want to ask you, and I don't know how much, I don't want to get you in trouble, don't want to do anything here. Is it frustrating, the lack of communication? As a fan, I'm frustrated, and I know Dick Monfort will respond from his iPad every now and then and that stuff. But it's really frustrating as a person that also works in media and works as my day job. The lack of communication from the Rockies organization, it's got to be. It would be infuriating to me, but that's why I really lean on you folks to get more. But it's got to be frustrating for you folks as well to not be able to get more information when you need it. Maybe I'm speaking out of line here.
You know, it certainly can be, especially at times with injuries where maybe the hand isn't totally shown right. It's get close to the vest and you're not really sure what to make and what the upcoming moves are going to be based off that, because it's always a domino effect when someone gets hurt or when someone comes off the IL. So at times it can be a challenge, but again, there's always a million different pieces that are going around. For the 26 guys on the roster, there's still 14 plus more on the 40-man roster, and there's a entire minor league system. So if you hit a stone wall, you know, you can do what you can as far as pushing through and talking with some of the other great folks that we have in the Rockies press box to get that information. But yeah, for some of the bigger picture things with sort of as you started, the direction of this franchise and are the expectations being met, those are things that, you know, we can really only surmise. And even when we do get someone to speak on those topics, it's hard to know if that's just selling something, if that's just the PR answer, if that's really the truth.
Yeah, and that's what's tough, because again, I understand. Like I said, I've heard great things about the PR people, the stats and all that stuff, and I know that there's a lot of people that do good stuff. I'm talking about the people at the top where the people we want to hear from. I really would I would just like some more open honesty. I would love to hear more about what's on Dick Monfort's mind, and this leads into my next question on and getting into maybe some big moves, because I want to get to Bob. I think it was Bob Nightingale who just said, "All right, Elias Diaz, he's gone. Count it, send it, see ya," and I'll believe it when I see it. I know that might be a thing, but I want to know about this Chris Bryant situation a little bit, and in this possible move. Obviously, another IL stint, huge contract. I mean, are the Rockies going to ride it out, or is this kind of, we've seen some big moves made from some teams. Jose Abreu, you know, just there in Houston. I hate picking on a guy in a frustrating time, but when we're just talking nuts and bolts, has there been any thought process at all on how to handle this Chris Bryant situation?
No, none as far as we've heard or been told. You know, with there being $100 million, there's really nothing you can do right now. The Jose Abreu example is a really good one, especially because he's only been around for a year plus, so that's kind of a short leash in that sense. But also, he was clogging up a roster spot for a really good team that is looking to get to the postseason this season, next year. So you know what? Take $30 million to go sit home. Whereas, you know, for Chris Bryant, it's much more money. There also really aren't a ton of guys that whose roster spot he's taking up. Like, you know, going forward, you know, that very well could change once we get to later in 2025, 2026, if there are those players. But Rockies, I think, do have a lot of fat on the 40-man roster. I mean, we continue to see players get designated for assignment over the last year, and they go right through without being claimed. You know, it's happened a couple times, but for the most part, you know, their players, you know, haven't been valued that much by other teams, so they're able to hold on to them. And really, if you look at their payroll going forward, they don't need to get rid of Chris Bryant's contract, which is both a good and a bad thing. You know, I've had people even suggest for the Rockies to sort of do what they did back in 2002 in that offseason, where in order to get rid of Mike Hampton's contract, sure, they accepted two really bad contracts or high cost contracts of Preston Wilson and Charles Johnson, but they also had to attach a really young and affordable player like Juan Pierre. So getting rid of Chris Bryant and then attaching Ezequiel Tovar's contract or even a Brenton Doyle, again, what does that allow the Rockies to do that they can't do right now? Because they still have money to burn. They only have about $90 million in guaranteed deals for next season. I think it's one of the reasons why you saw them so active ahead of the 2022 season, where they gave out all those extensions. They spent over $300 million. Brian's deal was part of that. But they gave it to their guys, to their homegrown players, partially because they had money to spend. And knowing that free agents don't really want to come here, you might as well give it to your own guy. So that's sort of my belief on the situation, is that they don't really need to get rid of his contract. And it may even cost them more to get rid of him than to just hold on to him, suck it up, or maybe even just tell him to go home and pay the rest of his contract off to him. But I think we might be at least a year away and maybe even a back surgery from that happening.
Yeah, I don't think the Rockies are ready to concede that or anywhere close to that move, and would at least hope for it to see if they could again let it work out. And with the future of Charlie Blackmon kind of being that there is a possible DH spot looming for Chris Bryant here, but it's clear that there are some issues there. You got to be pumped. Let's talk about some good things though. Brenton Doyle has clearly improved on offense. Ezequiel Tovar, I mean, there aren't enough words to really describe that. You can't be even more impressed. I mean, him being in his ranking in All-Star voting, not surprising, but ridiculous. Ryan McMahon kind of getting back in his Ryan McMahon streakiness, but still showing elite level talent. There's some gold here. It's just what is worth building around for you on this Rockies roster. Ezequiel Tovar is obviously number one. We need to see a strong return from Nolan Jones, which the small sample size right now, great walk rate, a couple of solid hit balls as well for Nolan Jones. What are you confident in the Rockies right now?
Honestly, not too much. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with a lot of those things. I mean, you look at the bullpen, and there's just still so many unknowns, right? Like Bird, Lawrence, and Victor Vodnik, they've all shown these signs of, hey, maybe these could be those guys, right? Maybe you saw that early on in a career like Adam Ottavino, but it took him a while to really get it under control, harness all that. Same thing with Carlos Estevez. But for every Estevez and Ottavino, there's been other guys, young players in the organization where it didn't really work out as they got older, and they were a relief pitcher. On the starting side, Carson Palmquist is probably the best in the minors. As far as the big league players, I think we're going to see Cal Quantrill either leave in free agency or get traded. Probably more likely to get traded as he's their best chip, I think, right now. But Germán Marquez is still young enough where if you do want to keep one of those older guys around and still can contribute, he is one of them. If he does want to stay and essentially be a Rocky his entire life, I think he's one of those pieces. We'll wait to see what happens when he comes back around the All-Star break, probably right after. He's going to make his third rehab start this week with High A Spokane, so that's a big one to get out of the way before he returns from Tommy John surgery. And on the offensive side, you hit the nail on the head as far as the big league talents in Tovar, Nolan Jones, and then Doyle's a little bit older, but still I think there's a lot of hope there that even by the time he's 30, 31, maybe he can age as well as a Charlie Blackmon. You say, oh wow, yeah, I could see Brent Doyle being a little bit of a quieter version of Charlie Blackmon in every way possible, both verbally and physically. I don't think Brent Doyle's gonna be the kind of guy that grows a beard and a mullet. He's the exact opposite of that. Very clean cut, nice guy. But yeah, those are those pieces. And I think for a lot of teams, they may have only a few, so I don't want to sound like I'm totally down. But there's still so many unknowns, and we'll get those answers in the next year or two when it comes to those young players that are in the system, and we can see what they're going to do. It's really a bummer with Jordan Beck obviously getting hurt, where he was picking up a little bit of momentum, and the league was obviously catching up to him, figuring it out. But he was learning the ways of a big leaguer, and he could be one of those guys going forward. But as far as players that you're going to say in 4 years from now are going to lift this team to maybe their next postseason, there's really only a handful right now.
The one guy I think that has made some noise coming back, Michael Toglia is an interesting guy, I think, to continue to watch. As we've seen, I hope the Rockies, he's a guy I don't think they got a fair shake at the beginning of the year. I think it was kind of weird that the Rockies sent down their most home run, the guy with the most home runs at a certain point in the season. That seems like something you want to reward, but something to keep an eye on. I want to put the GM hat on here, Patrick. I want to I'm going to tap you in for Bill Schmidt here coming up after the break, because I think there's some questions to be asked about a certain catcher for the Colorado Rockies, and I think a certain second baseman as well. We're going to talk about that coming up here in segment number 3 of today's episode of Locked on Rockies.
Pitch walk to the number 9 hitter. Lineup turns over for Brenton Doyle. Bounce to second. Lux to Kike. Kike to Freddie. A double play. They're 2-for-1 special tonight from Bobby Miller.
You may go 5 more years before Nick Mears is on for the Rockies in the 6th after 5 innings from Ryan Feltner. Freddie, a play by McMahon to first in plenty of time. Highway robbery by Rock. Steals a hit from Freeman. Ohtani was moving.
He's giving crazy effort tonight. We've seen some really good defensive play.
Bouchard, Rockies are down by 2, infielders back for the Dodgers. Veteran Daniel Hudson's been outstanding for the Dodgers. 3 wins, 1.
We are on the Locked On Rockies podcast, joined by Patrick Lyons here today, doing a little big picture kind of philosophy, looking at the state of the Rockies right now. And I wish we could be, I feel the despair a little bit in your voice, Patrick. Unfortunately, it's kind of been that tough season. Every time there's been some stuff to get excited about, you go through some stretches that tamps it out, and then you play the Dodgers and you kind of feel a little outmatched. But let's tag you in here. I made the call. I said, you know what, Patrick's handling the trade deadline this year and the rest of the season. Run me through what you would do in 2024 for the rest of this season. Is it trading certain players? Is it going with the young guys? What do you think the Rockies should prioritize, and what do you think the Rockies should do at the deadline as we are talking here in mid-June?
Yeah, I think the Rockies do need to turn it over more to some of the younger players. They're doing that right now at the big league level. It's funny to say that, okay, they already got Tolia out in right field. Goodman's catching a little bit more behind the plate, and Elias Montero's getting the bulk of starts over at first base. Doyle and Jones are in the outfield. Tovar is there at shortstop. Ryan McMahon is a fixture. There's actually not any room for these guys to come up. So that is a problem in and of itself. But as far as what this roster looks like at the trade deadline, pretty much anyone that's not nailed down really should be traded and see what you can get. Now, it's obviously a little bit different with players whose contracts don't expire until the end of 2025. Brendan Rodgers being one of those players. Yes, you have Ariel Amador, but could you possibly wait to deal Rodgers this offseason and get more? How much more is it? And is it worth kind of stunting any of that growth that you could possibly get out of Ariel Amador over the final 2 months of the season? That's one of those questions that they would have to answer for sure. Same thing goes for someone like an Austin Gomber and Cal Quantrill. They still need to roll out pitchers in the starting rotation, but at the same time, they're not going to contend next year. They're hoping to maybe be a little bit more relevant next year and really have 2025 be like 2016, where they took that big step forward before making the postseason. Well, if that's going to happen, the next season after that, you're not going to have, more than likely, Gomber, Rodgers, and Quantrill, because they're all free agents. So really, what is the point of having those kind of players? Sure, you have to replace them and find those guys, but you got to be able to trust the front office to be able to do that in some capacity. So those guys, you got to see what you can get for them. Same thing with Jalen Beeks, who's a free agent at the end of the year. Elias Diaz, also a free agent at the end of the year. Dakota Hudson is going to be around for another year as well, because he only has 4 years of service time going into this season, so you can have him for 2025 if you want. You might not be able to get a ton for a guy who has an ERA around 5, but you could get something, and you can find that needle in the haystack. And the more guys you have in the minors that have some upside, the better off you're going to be, because some of them are going to get hurt, some of them are going to break down. So you just need as many as possible, and you simply don't need as many veterans as possible on the big league roster, because you're on your way to losing 100 games again this year, and you might not even have them next year because they're going to be free agents. So Dakota Hudson, Jay Cave, those guys, I don't think they're going to bring a ton back in return, but just the opportunity to bring up some young guys, give them a chance, get their first taste of the majors, especially if they need to be added to the 40-man roster this offseason anyway. And again, maybe you bring back something that you can use and can impact the big league roster in future seasons when you are going to be a bit more relevant and pushing for the postseason. So you've got nothing to lose with these kind of players.
Yes, they should. Will they? I mean, I do think Elias Diaz makes sense. I do think the Rockies will not trade Ryan McMahon. I think when you're talking about non-starters, it's a Ryan McMahon. I don't think Charlie Blackmon's going anywhere. I think he's going to finish there. But Montero's an interesting one. We're almost out of time. Just give me. Do you think it's likely that teams even want these players? I mean, Cal Quantrill's an interesting one. I kind of thought the Rockies might try to extend him with his successes, but maybe it's kind of interesting how German Marquez and Kyle Freeland could replace Austin Gomber and Cal Quantrill in the rotation when you really think about it. How likely is it for any of these moves to be made?
Yeah, that kind of remains to be seen. That's the $1 million question to see exactly how that goes down. I think every member of the 40-man roster has some value. But is that value less than what the Rockies think that player is worth, and where does it get the team going forward? I think there's a lot of clubs that would look at a Michael Toglia and say, no, we would just probably leave him as a first baseman, let him switch hit, or you know what, he's just going to be a left-handed hitter. I think teams have those plans, but what are you going to give me? What are you going to give us for Michael Toglia? And if it's, only a bag of balls, which obviously would be very insulting, you just say no, and that ends the conversation. So that's really what it's all about. I think the biggest question is how creative the Rockies can be, because they don't have a ton of pieces with a lot of value, really outside of, I think, Beeks and Diaz, where, you know what, even if you get less than what you expected, it's something, right? Because once they become free agents, strong odds you're going to get nothing for them, and they're going to leave in free agency, and you're already going to turn the keys to catcher over to Jacob Stallings and some combination of Goodman and Romo. So you might as well get something for nothing. The guys that are going to be around for 2025, or you have team control, that's a little bit different, but that's really where I think you get creative. And if you do want to say, you know what, Elias Montero doesn't really work out. I know he was a part of the Nolan Arenado trade, and so that's going to get drudged up all over again. But you know what? It does make the deal a little bit better. It does spice it up for the other side. And if he does go off and ends up being a perennial 20 home run, 25 homer guy, like I think some people expect him to be with another organization, again, you just have to suck that up, because if he's not giving you what you need on your roster, and he's clogging things up a little bit, clogging up the pipeline for the young players, then you might as well get something, and your organization is still better off for that. You don't necessarily have to win a trade to make a good trade. And so I think the Rockies, they might struggle with that concept, is that they might not really win any trades here going forward at this deadline, but they still can make a good trade that benefits them going forward.
That's the right type of mindset, because this ain't working. It ain't going to work next year without all the people moving on. You got to get creative. It's just, will the Rockies be creative? Patrick, thank you so much for your time. Once again, where can people go so they can follow your work, follow what you do all season long?
JustBaseball.com for all written content, and all the social media is either at Patrick D. Lyons or at Patrick D. Lyons MLB.
Patrick's a big-time friend of the show. It's a must follow if you're Rockies fans. Folks, thank you so much for tuning into Locked On Rockies and making us your first listen of the day. We are free and streaming on your favorite streaming services. And folks, a reminder, the show's looking a little different these days. I'm actually going to be getting coverage for the show next week, because I will be off, but there's tons more great Rockies stuff, so don't miss out on all the good stuff right here on Locked On Rockies. Patrick, thank you so much for your time. And folks, until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.
Right-handed hitter in Elias Montero.
And this is a ground ball to third, and it eats off Biggio. Montero drops Biggio. And this ball is hit well left center field. Running hard is Paz. Can't make the catch. Montero is to second. He'll get to third, stops there.
The tying and go-ahead runs in scoring position for Brenton Doyle.
And it is wide to left. Tagging Montero. The catch made by Taylor. Throw on his way. Going to be cut off. And Dorman.
That's the first run Hudson has given up since May 3rd, 13 innings pitched. Doyle just takes a nice, smooth, easy approach, gets something that he can elevate.
1-0. And a base hit the other way. Winning runs aboard.
Interesting now what's in mind.
Ground ball toward the hole. Through. Cable shut it down. Got to get back. First a victory from the Rockies in the ninth yesterday. The Rockies would love to do the same here. High fly ball, deep enough. It should be. Cave tag.